Do you ever feel like you're getting in a rut in your family environment where there's not a lot of tolerance or acceptance for other viewpoints and you're not quite sure how to teach it? If that is the case, today's episode is for you. We have a special guest on that is going to teach us exactly how we can grow and expand our worldview and have greater tolerance and acceptance, and how we can teach that to our children. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have a special guest, Ricki Schwab. She's a local coordinator for Ayusa, which we'll explain in just a minute. And she has nearly a decade of experience in international student exchanges. So she's very passionate about cultural diplomacy, and she has hosted several exchange students herself and really believes in the power of cross-cultural experiences to foster that global understanding and acceptance, which is part of what she'll talk to us about today. So I'm really excited to have you on the show, Ricki. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you, Kendra. Happy to be here.
Do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself with us in your own words? Tell us why you love this space, like why you're passionate about it. Your own.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a parent, right? So I'm actually a single mom of 4 boys, which keeps me very busy. So hosting international exchange students is something that came into our lives one day with a phone call, right? Like I call them the glimmers of the universe or God or your higher power just nudging you. And it really was a phone call one day from a friend who was like, "Hey, we've got a boy from Spain. Can you take him?" And I was like, "What? I didn't even know hosting was a thing. What do you mean?" And we just said yes to that phone call. And it has completely changed our lives and led to this international world of hosting exchange students. And then for me, it turned into a career. And it absolutely fulfills my passions of just loving people without any labels or barriers. And so it really is the best form of education I've been able to give my boys, open up doors for them to go to abroad. Our students come back and see us. And I love seeing how it's shaped my kiddos into just the men they're becoming.
Oh, I love that. You talk about those nudges. I was talking the night before to my husband about how I have always wanted to exchange students. I really want to do it. And it's just been on my mind. I feel like it would have been really good for my kids. And the next day, Ricki talked to me about it. And my husband looked at me like I was lying to him almost, because we talked about it. And then the next day you called. I was like, no, I swear I had nothing to do with that. And then we did. So we've had 3 exchange students so far. How many have you had, Ricki?
Long term, 7, many more short term or on the couch or hanging out with us, but 7 full ones.
That's amazing. And what has been your very favorite part of it?
Really building global families. Like we do feel that we have families and people we love. So we did Spain and Germany, and then Mexico and Thailand, South Korea and the Netherlands, and then Chile. And as a parent, I feel so confident in my boys traveling because I know there's people there, locals to show them around, and just role models with different backgrounds and beliefs and values and upbringings. It's been a very natural way to show the boys outside of Idaho specifically, or even my own family unit, just different ways of life and just staying in contact. I was in Germany last November visiting my student that we hosted, and he was 15 when we had him, and now he's 25, like he's a man. And so seeing the difference in him grow has also been it's such an honor to be able to walk that journey with them.
Oh, absolutely. I loved it too. We actually just talked to ours from France on Sunday. And yeah, it is wonderful. It is like having siblings all over the world. And I didn't anticipate how wonderful it would be for my kids, because you know how they start to ignore what their siblings are saying about maybe there was rough edges they need to smooth out. There's this other teenager that they look up to that comes to the home and is often responsible, often respectful, and they can't get away with as much, nor do they even really want to, when it's this stranger initially that comes in and is giving them similar feedback with time. And that's been a lovely thing. They I guess in a way, are parenting them or helping them grow in ways that I could not. So that's been beautiful.
Agreed. Yes.
Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about some of the things that we've been talking about, just to pick your brain a little bit about your expertise?
Yeah, of course. Please.
All right. So, my first question for you is, how has exposing your kids to those different cultures and viewpoints changed how they see the world? And maybe what differences have you noticed?
The first word that comes to mind is maybe like a different, I wouldn't say more mature, but just like a different maturity in my kids. I actually just had this conversation with their basketball coach because we had a big fundraiser dinner on Friday. And she was like, "Oh, so, your son was telling me you work in international exchange. What does this look like?" And even the teacher commented on, "It's so amazing that you have exposed your kids and traveled with your kids." I work with boys all the time who haven't even left the state or the community. They're more tolerant and they're more accepting. They just don't look through as many labels. And of course, they hear it, right? Teenagers and kids are kids, and there's teasing and bullying that goes on. But at the core of it, they know people around the world. We also work with a program that is specific with Muslim populations in Muslim countries. And so they're used to seeing students in hijabs, or they're used to people who are Muslim or come from Pakistan or Afghanistan or all these places that have these stereotypical barriers attached to them. And the boys are just like, "No, but this is this student or this is this student." They love people for who they are despite where they come from. So that's been really cool and endearing to see. And then from the heavier side, as we've stepped into more wars that are breaking out, the boys do know students who come from those areas. And so they have this sense of social responsibility of deeply caring about what's happening in other parts of the world, where as Americans, we can be very removed, right? Like we don't necessarily open up to what's going on globally. And so letting my kids personally know somebody from those parts of the world has been very important to me so that they have a sense of social responsibility.
I used to think all of us in our teens and our 20s, we can be very judgmental or narrow minded, closed minded. I think just developmentally, that's normal. And but yet we think we are not. And it wasn't until I went to both a left and a right wing university for my higher education that I really started to recognize like how maybe narrow minded I had been before. And that was both very difficult and also very important for my growth, my development. And recently I had a client fire me because she wanted to know how I voted and had no indication of what my political beliefs were. But I don't know if she just looked me up online and made assumptions. I'm not really sure. But there was such fear there that if we don't think alike, I am not safe. And it was so intense that it instilled in me again that desire, and that's why I really wanted to have you on too, to be willing to expand our worldview instead of being so fearful of somebody that's different. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Where to go with that. So what you just said is a big reason I'm in the career in the field I am, is to teach hands-on experience and take away those labels of fear. Again, especially working with like the grant that is focused on Muslim countries or cultures, is we do fear what we don't know. And I think that it's hard. I I face that resistance in Idaho all the time, right? There's still certain communities or demographics that can't or won't put those students with because I can't break that barrier. But when you break it, like it's magical. And so I think that just being persistent and true to who we are, right? Like leading with that acceptance and tolerance from a very genuine place eventually leaves like that trickle. In the Ayusa world, we call it like the starfish, right? Like you can have this visual of walking along the beach and there's all these starfish and you're throwing one at a time. And some people might look at that and just be like, this is never ending job. Like I give up. Why would I do this? But it matters to each individual one that you're still throwing back into the ocean or like changing that perspective on. It's a tiring task. It's a hard task, but it's an important task.
Absolutely. And the thing that I didn't anticipate, I feel like I'm promoting exchange students, but wasn't even my intention, but I guess I am doing the exchange program. But I didn't anticipate like how we would both grow. Like I thought we'd help the student, but in reality, like I learned so much. It's almost like accelerated parenting. You learn how to parent all these different personality styles, but not only that, like now they have different set of beliefs, whether it's religion, whether it's just their own culture at home, how they dress, how they eat, if they're picky, all of these things, and learning how to navigate that where you both leave with such an expanded worldview. And that has been really beautiful in ways I didn't anticipate.
I agree for sure.
I went a little bit on a tangent there, but my next question for you is for parents wanting to raise more open minded kids, what's a tip that you have that's actually doable to help with that in everyday life?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I would posting, as you and I have talked about, but that's not always accessible to everybody. It starts with being open-minded to yourself, right? So, like, you could look outside of celebrating different holidays than maybe that you're used to celebrating, like getting involved with different religious organizations or community centers that hold services or even volunteering opportunities. Idaho is a big refugee resettlement state, so that's one avenue I use is teaching that heart of service to the kids for different demographics. So I would start with your communities and just encourage parents to get out of their normal grind and their upbringing, right? Like their unconscious biases of how they were raised and what they were taught. Look at their own judgments and resistance, and then that's where you start to expand right there.
Yeah, and truly, that is one thing I'm still, I think, learning about because I talk about this on the podcast, but I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And whether it's that or any denomination or any religious belief, even that alone can be difficult. If you're bringing another child in, and like I mentioned, for example, Europeans, we had 3 Europeans, and their style of dress is very different than how we raise our children. So even that, like, how do you navigate something when it's not like they're trying to be disobedient or whatever? It's just like how they grew up. It's very normal. It's like very acceptable. And yet it's different than how you parent. Like, how do you have those discussions? How do you help your kids understand that? And that's just one example. There's plenty of things that are different. What kind of conversations do you have with your kids about those differences and maybe their frustrations? Maybe it's even something like discipline or responsibility. I don't know.
I just want to commend you, and I love that I'm hearing you and your husband also step through that layer of fear, right? That resistance of, oh, we might bring somebody into our home that's going to be very different and expose our children to things that maybe we don't want them to see. But we're teaching with that growth mindset. So I love it. You didn't lead with fear, you led with education and like understanding and examples. And I think it comes down to communication. Don't be afraid to have the direct conversation. That's one thing that Europeans have right. They're more direct than us, and it doesn't have to be in a confrontational way, but just a direct conversation can help people come to understanding so much faster. And so with my kids, it's just those conversations of the differences are okay. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. And I use this in my own household as well, just because we're a divorced household. So you're going to be given two different perspectives. You're going to look through two different colors, and then you are going to form your own opinion. And that's what we want as parents is we want to see our kids making decisions that are healthy, but in alignment to them, right? Like from a full place of their happiness, but true integrity to being good humans. And so the more exposure and hands-on experience you can give them to let them make those decisions, it's only education in the bank.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes so much easier said than done. I feel like a lot of us, when we get comfortable in our similarities, it is hard to challenge that. Like, I actually did a podcast episode on this recently. Like, how often do we surround ourselves with people that are a different age than us? How often do we surround ourselves with a different political party? We like to be surrounded by things that are familiar, and yet that doesn't really challenge us or help us grow, really.
Correct. Correct. I agree. Just to the question you asked of, as and I was answering as parents, how do we start? I love what you said, and it comes back to looking at ourselves. You just said it yourself. Who are our friends? Who are our demographics? Like, where are we working? Where's our time of service? Assessing your own energy and your time and your talents of, is it diverse and is it teaching growth? The wording to me right now is tolerance and acceptance. And I feel like that's important to me just because when you look globally of what's going on in the world, but are you putting yourself as an example and as a parent in situations that challenge you, that teach you to look at things through a humanitarian lens?
Yeah. I like to study social engineering or World War II and how there's often this, I don't like to call it agenda, but you know what I'm getting at. But that's what they did with Jews, with any time that there's differences or the Hutus and the Tutsis or like different places in the world, like they villainize the other side. And anytime you see that coming up, maybe that's conservatives, maybe that's liberals, whoever that is, recognize there's an opportunity for greater tolerance and acceptance and teaching your kids in that moment, like how you can push back against that and to change that cultural norm that's starting to happen more and more. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
All right. Another question I have for you is when cultural misunderstandings maybe happen at home, especially with your 7 exchange students, how do you handle them? And what has your family learned from some of those moments?
We get through it with humor. It's like the direct conversation. It's figuring out the why, right? Like, where is this coming from? Why are you doing it this way? The one big difference I've noticed in hosting too is like American, we're all about talking about emotions and the why and the touchy feely, and a lot of other cultures are not there yet. There's almost taboo around mental health. So that's been interesting to navigate of having a cultural misunderstanding come up, and then because my background is in psychology, just a general psychology. You don't want to use the word taboo because that can be taken almost negatively, and you don't want somebody to think that, oh, we're doing it right and you're doing it wrong. That's the whole reason of hosting, but being open to new experiences while you're in country. And I tell my kids the same thing. Like, if something were to come up, we're going to be open to this different way or viewpoint, at least while they're in our home. Looking at things as temporary. Everything in life is temporary. Like, change is the only constant in life. And so I think that helps teach the student, your kids, yourself, that resistance and that, like, that grit of, we can push our edge and expand because it's temporary.
Yeah, definitely. I love how you're able to teach your children so many beautiful lessons and the community as you've been doing this. I wanted to ask you about this. I almost feel like you're alluding to it a little bit, but what do you think is the biggest myth that you've seen parents believe about maybe introducing their kids to other cultures, whether that's exchange students or otherwise?
I think it could be that somehow they're going to influence you or influence your children or expose to something so different that maybe you're gonna go that route, or it could just be, it's so different that I don't know how to handle it. I don't know how to be open to this. And then you could for sure get very deep into political or religion, or you look at the whole reason the grant program was right after 9/11, right? So we'll just get into that. It was started after 9/11 by the Department of State as a grassroots diplomacy program to bridge the gap between the US and Muslim-based countries. And I have had schools, I have had families, my own ex-husband had a lot of resistance to anybody that was Muslim, especially coming from the Middle East, coming into our home, and it was a fear-based. And I would just look at them and go, "But they're teenagers. Like, there's nothing to fear here." And it does come from generational trauma. Like, we have to realize that this is so many generations that has been passed down of this stigma of, we fear this person, we fear this demographic. But when you lean into that fear, you realize they're just kids, they're just humans, they're just, even like they're adults, even like the refugee populations, right? We all have the human need of just wanting to be seen, heard, and validated.
Yeah. That reminds me of a story actually. Just yesterday, I was listening to a podcast episode where it talks about this study. I might butcher it a little bit, but of the Ku Klux Klan. And they wanted to go and understand it, do research on it. And what they actually found, this man, just by interviewing them and listening to them and not judging them, just being kind and showing them respect, which they had a lot of hatred because of their beliefs. And I totally get why. And yet there was some crazy number, I forgot the percentage, but that actually abandoned those beliefs and change because of that, like, love and that listening, that tolerance, that acceptance that you talked about, instead of something that's so charged and so bad. That is the only way change could happen. I don't wanna say the only way, but by this person going in and just, like, trying to understand and seeking to love and accept something that was so terrible for him. Anyway, it was just a fascinating story. So, like, in any situation, no matter how different somebody might be, there is still space for respect and for love, essentially.
Definitely.
My last question I have for you is, you've worked with international students, as we've talked about, but how has that shaped the way you parent or even interact as a family? And what has been the best thing?
How has it shaped my parenting? We're just a family that welcomes anybody. Like, it's almost every year when placement season comes around, especially my 2 youngest ones are like, "Are we getting an exchange student, mom?" It's like a puppy almost, which is a bad analogy, but it like, "Is another one coming?" So, it's just I've seen it form into this excitement of who do we get to love next, and I love that in the kids. We're taking a break from hosting right now just because life is insane, but we still are exposed and in the communities by the students who are here. So it's changed my parenting by just that, like leading with there's always room at the table, there's always extra food, like there's always room in our hearts to welcome somebody else in. And I hope that the kids continue that as they grow into adults. And then it's just fun and exciting. I think back to the holidays and how we've been exposed to different holidays or the parents in the other country have involved my children in their holidays or sent gifts and taught them different ways. I think about like in Spain, how the tooth fairies are rad, and the Netherlands, Santa comes on a steamboat, and knowing that my kids have that knowledge it's just been really cool. So I don't know that it really answered your question, but I think I'm finding it hard to narrow down a specific parenting trait. Like, I don't know that there was one aha moment. I feel like it's been really fluid over the years being involved in this of just a slow, natural, organic way of there's not a fear of, am I going to host from this country? It's more like, where have I not hosted to continue to educate my children?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel the same way. Very soon, we want to have a teenage boy come in, and my husband is a little resistant. And I'm like, how can I tackle this from a different angle? For him, I think it might be like saying goodbye might be a little bit hard for him sometimes. But I love it. And my kids, all of them are so, so excited. And I love how you talked about, like, there's always room at the table. And it really does create this international interest that wasn't there in my kids before. Like, it was always in me, like, y different countries seem so far away and, like, beyond their ability to conceptualize, but then once they hear about these things and they learn about other cultures, it's almost like they're hungry to understand more, and what other countries can we host and learn about? Like, I love that aspect too, so I'm hoping my husband will change his mind and we can get another country next fall, but we'll see.
I'm curious from your perspective, being a host parent, has it shaped your parenting in a specific way? Like, how would you answer that question?
I think what you already talked about with it's helped me increase my tolerance and acceptance, and also, I thought I was a good communicator, like, I'm a therapist. You'd think I would get it, but because there's so many differences that you don't deal with on a day-to-day basis in your demographic or your area or your culture, yeah, I had to learn how to do things differently for every single child, and that was so good for me, like, being more assertive when I thought I was already very assertive and
Yeah.
work through conflict resolution, and are you gonna be more of a friend or a parent to them? Like, how does that look? And navigating that differently every time, and It's been beautiful. Yeah, that was a hard question to answer.
This made me think of a parental lens. We're raising kids who are gonna go into the workforce, and they're already having this built-in soft skill of knowing how to communicate across different cultures, and so many companies are becoming global, so that's huge, and so we did that from the home.
Yeah, and I want to feed that fire of learning other languages and that greater open-mindedness, expanded worldview. But yeah, so many beautiful things. Hopefully, people are more receptive after this. Again, I wasn't even intending on promoting exchange students, but I think we totally did.
It's just promoting love. You have the opportunity as a parent to love another kid in another part of the world, and that just makes me so excited. You talked about the goodbye. The goodbye is so brutal, but I always tell people, like, the harder the goodbye, it just shows the depth of your love, and that again, that teaches to relationships, to marriage, like, parenting, nothing is forever. It isn't. And if we can learn to be in the moment and give 100% of us and not fear that ending, that's how you expand as a human. That's how you grow as an individual, is to push yourself to those limits and to let that person go and then they're going to come back to you, hopefully, right? Like ours have come back. And so I just think it's so exciting to think about how we can truly just love somebody from another part of the world.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a very positive experience for sure. Thank you so much, Ricky, for coming on and helping us understand this. I know a lot of people don't know much about it, like what it looks like. And if they have questions, if they want to host, whether it's in Idaho or else another state, what can they do? How can they find out more information or where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm local to Idaho, so I'm happy to share my contact information, Kendra, or you can, but students can go anywhere in the United States. So yes, anybody anywhere can host, and it's global. Like Americans can go abroad too. We don't teach that to our children. We go college level, but there's plenty of study abroad programs for American teens as well. Our company is called Ayusa. It's just AYUSA. But I would just encourage them to get involved with their schools or to look in their local communities if it's something that they're interested in doing. And if you're in Idaho, you're more than welcome to reach out to me directly.
Awesome. And I can put your information in the show notes, but is there an email they can reach out to you or anything right now that you could say?
It's just my first name, last name. So rschwab at ayusa.org. Easier to look up the company, which is AYUSA.
Okay. We'll definitely put that in the show notes then if they have any questions. And thank you again. We really appreciate you coming on and helping us understand how we can have that greater tolerance and acceptance in our families and personally. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. A beautiful topic. I'm happy to discuss it. Thanks so much, Kendra.